You think you know reality shows. You think it's just scripted drama, fake tears, and exaggerated emotions for the camera. But what if one night the script burned away and everything you thought was for entertainment suddenly became real, deadly real? The cameras were supposed to be rolling. The makeup lights were supposed to be glowing. But when the contestants walked into the mansion, nothing felt right. No buzzing crew members, no director yelling cut, no cameras pointing at their faces, just silence. Silence thick enough to hear their own breathing. At first, they laughed it off. Maybe this was part of the show. Maybe the producers wanted them to feel isolated, to heighten the drama. But then the doors locked. Every exit sealed with a sharp metallic click that echoed through the halls. No one smiled after that. The rules were explained not by a producer, not by the prince they came here to fight for, but by a distorted voice over the loudspeakers. It called itself the host, and the host had one rule. By dawn, only one contestant could remain alive. You could hear the gasp travel through the room like a wave. Someone chuckled nervously, thinking it was a sick prank. But then the sound of steel. Shutters crashed down over the windows. Bulletproof glass. Every phone had been confiscated earlier. The host wasn't joking. That was the beginning of their nightmare. Angela was the first to panic. She banged on the door, shouting that she had rights, that this was kidnapping, that she'd sue everyone involved. The host only laughed, a low, mechanical sound, before telling her she'd just volunteered for the first challenge. They were all forced into the dining hall, a long, candlelit table stretching down the center. On each plate sat a glass of wine, deep red, glistening in the low light. The host's voice echoed, "One of these glasses has been poisoned. Drink, and show us how far you'll go to win love." No one moved at first. Hearts pounded, eyes darted from glass to glass. Angela cursed under her breath, trembling as she lifted her cup. The others tried to stop her, but her pride was louder than her fear. She tilted it back and swallowed. 10 seconds later, foam bubbled at her lips. Her body convulsed, crashing against the polished table before she collapsed to the floor. Screams filled the hall. Chairs clattered as they stumbled back. Someone tried to rush to her side, but the host's voice cut through the chaos. She made her choice. Choices have consequences. And just like that, the game was real. One contestant down, 5 left. That night, none of them slept. They huddled in the living room, whispering about escape plans, about hidden cameras, about how no one even knew where they were. The mansion wasn't in the city. There were no sounds of cars outside, no neighbors, no lights in the distance. It was surrounded by endless blackness, like the world itself had disappeared. One girl, Rachel, swore she saw someone watching from the staircase in the shadows. But when they shined a candle toward it, nothing was there. Or maybe something had already moved. The next morning, the host announced the second challenge. This time, it wasn't about poison. It was about loyalty. The contestants were split into pairs, forced to tie themselves together with rope and complete a series of tasks. It sounded simple enough, until they realized the tasks were designed to turn them against each other. One room had a single plate of food, enough for only one person. Another had a safe filled with keys, but only one of the keys unlocked the rope. The others were dummies, wasting precious minutes. Each wrong attempt tightened the rope, cutting deeper into their skin. Rachel and Emily were paired together, and Rachel, who had been kind and soft-spoken, suddenly turned feral. Hunger drove her to claw at the food, shoving Emily aside. By the time the challenge ended, Emily's arm was bruised, and Rachel's hand shook as she tried to defend herself. The host laughed again, calling it the beauty of honesty. When the tasks ended, the prince was told to choose who impressed him more, and once again, a black rose was handed out, this time to Emily. She cried, begged, pleaded for her life, but the host only said, "A rose is a rose, until it wilts," and she was dragged away screaming. 4 left, but here's where it gets worse. Because that night, they realized Angela's body was missing, and Emily's too. Not a trace left. The rooms were clean, polished, as if no one had ever died there. And then came the blood smear on the bathroom mirror. Just one word, written in shaking strokes. Run. The word on the mirror changed everything. Until then, the contestants thought this was just punishment, a sick form of entertainment for someone watching behind hidden screens. But run wasn't written by the host. The letters were jagged, uneven, drawn in real blood. It was a message from someone else. But who? Angela? Emily? Were they still alive somewhere? Or was this the host's way of twisting their minds even further? No one knew, but paranoia took root like poison in their veins. Every creak in the floorboards made them flinch. Every flicker of candlelight stretched shadows into monsters. The house itself felt alive, groaning at night as though it was laughing, along with the host. By the third day, hunger gnawed at their stomachs. Food rations were reduced. The host delivered trays of stale bread and murky water, sometimes laced with a bitter aftertaste no one dared swallow. The prince himself, the supposed prize, wasn't spared. He looked paler every day, his arrogance cracking as fear crept in. The host's next challenge was announced with a shriek of feedback through the speakers. This one was crueler than the rest. It was called the mirror test. Each contestant was led into a dark room, one by one, with only a single mirror on the wall and a candle at their feet. The host ordered them to speak their darkest truth aloud, something they'd never confess to anyone. If they refused, the candle would extinguish and the door would remain locked. One by one, the confessions poured out. Rachel confessed she'd cheated on her boyfriend before coming on the show, just to see if she could do better. Another girl admitted she only came for fame, not love, hoping to boost her following. The prince, yes, even he was forced to enter, confessed he wasn't rich anymore. His fortune had vanished, and this show was his last attempt to keep his name alive. But the most haunting confession came from Holly, the sharp-tongued contestant who'd mocked the others. She whispered that she once watched her own sister drown, and instead of helping, she froze, because deep down, she was glad to be the only daughter left behind. When she walked out of that room, no one looked her in the eyes again. That night, the prince was told to eliminate another. He hesitated, torn between fear and guilt, but eventually handed the black rose to Rachel. She screamed, clawing at his arm, shouting that she deserved to live more than Holly. But the host's laughter drowned her out, and once again, a door opened, and she was dragged into the dark. 3 left, and yet once more, her body vanished by morning. Instead, on her pillow was a single rose petal, dipped in blood. The house was playing tricks. Or maybe the host wasn't working alone. The remaining contestants barely spoke. They were shadows of themselves. Haunted eyes, trembling hands. Even the prince seemed hollow, reduced to a pawn in someone else's cruel design. Then came the final challenge. The host's voice was colder than ever. By dawn, only one of you will remain. Tonight, you will choose whether your hands stay clean or whether they are stained forever. The challenge was brutal. Each contestant was given a weapon, a kitchen knife, dull but sharp enough to pierce flesh. They were told only one could survive until sunrise. No more ceremonies, no more roses. Survival would come from betrayal. For the first time, the prince begged. He begged them not to play along. He swore they could work together, find a way out. But the doors stayed locked, the windows stayed sealed, and hunger, fear, and madness whispered louder than reason. Holly was the first to snap. She lunged at Kimberly, her knife flashing in the candlelight. The others screamed, chairs toppled, chaos shattered the air. Kimberly fought back, slashing at Holly's arm, leaving a streak of blood. The prince tried to separate them, but the host's voice roared, "Let them show their true selves." The fight ended with Holly gasping on the floor, blood pooling beneath her. Kimberly stood trembling, knife in hand, staring at what she had done. 2 left, Kimberly and the prince. But then something happened no one expected. The host's voice cracked. For the first time, it didn't sound mechanical. It sounded human. And then silence. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Kimberly dropped the knife, her breath shaking. The prince called out, demanding answers, demanding the host show themselves. And then a door creaked open. Not one of the locked exits, not the front door or the windows. It was a hidden passage behind the dining room wall. A narrow hallway glowed faintly with red light, beckoning them inside. Against every instinct, they stepped through. The hallway twisted downward like a tunnel, leading into a chamber lined with screens. Dozens of screens, and on each one, Angela, Emily, Rachel, Holly, every eliminated contestant. Their faces pale, their eyes wide, their bodies slumped in chairs, hooked up to wires, alive, barely. Gasps tore from Kimberly's throat. The prince staggered back, his hand gripping the wall for support, and in the middle of the chamber stood Jerry, the producer. But his eyes weren't the same. They were hollow, manic, his smile stretched too wide. He wasn't just following orders. He was the host all along. "You wanted fame," he hissed, his voice raw but eerily familiar from the speakers. "You wanted love. You wanted the world to see you. Well, they're watching. They've always been watching." On the screens above, a live counter ticked, millions of views climbing every second. This wasn't just a sit game for him. It was a broadcast, a secret reality show streamed to the darkest corners of the internet. Millions of strangers laughing, cheering, typing comments as the contestants' lives unraveled. The prince shouted, demanding to know why. "Why do this? Why them?" Jerry only laughed. "Because this is the only real television left. People don't want fake drama anymore. They want truth. They want blood. They want to know what love is worth when death is the price." Kimberly stared at him, trembling but furious. "And what happens when no one is left?" Jerry tilted his head, smiling. "That's the beauty of it. The story never ends. Because the winner doesn't get freedom. The winner becomes the next host." The room spun. The air felt poisoned. And suddenly, everything clicked. The missing producers, the vanished crew, the endless cycle. It wasn't just a show. It was a trap, feeding on itself, generation after generation. Kimberly looked at the prince. The prince looked back. And in that moment, both knew. Winning didn't matter. Surviving didn't matter. The only way to break the cycle was to end the show, permanently. The cameras above flickered. The viewership counter ticked higher. Millions of eyes waited, desperate to see the finale. But instead of playing along, Kimberly grabbed the nearest chair and hurled it into the screens. Sparks exploded, glass shattered, alarms blared. The feed cut to static. Screams echoed from unseen speakers, not from the host, but from the audience losing their show. The lights flickered out, and then nothing, just silence. When the police eventually arrived days later, the mansion was empty. No contestants, no producer, no prince, just broken screens and the faint smell of smoke. The world never saw them again. But sometimes, in the dead of night, strange videos appear online, grainy footage of familiar faces, begging for help, the title always the same, The Final Rose. And those who watch too long often go missing themselves. So the question is, if you were handed that rose, would you take it? Would you risk everything for love, for fame, for one chance at survival? Or would you walk away before the host calls your name? Because maybe the game hasn't ended, maybe it never does, and maybe right now you're already part of the audience.